rode out in his gilded chariot, with the army stretching for miles behind him, he had no doubts about his coming victory. Ramses had never been close to defeat. Soon Kadesh would surely be his. Ramses the Great was leading the most powerful military force the world had ever seen. They passed swiftly through Gaza, northward into Canaan, up through Galilee. When they entered Syria, they would have seen vast areas of green, with wildflowers unknown in Egypt. And in the distance, snow-capped mountains, probably the only time any of them had ever seen snow. Eager to reach his goal, Ramses rose early, put on his battle garments, and led the division of Amun towards Kadesh. Stretching miles behind were the other three divisions. As Ramses neared the Orontes River, two local tribesmen joined the entourage. They told Ramses that the Hittite king, Mutwalis, upon hearing that Ramses was approaching, had fled with his army 120 miles north to Aleppo. To the young Ramses, this seemed perfectly reasonable. Eager for victory, with only the division of Amun, he pressed right on, right up to Kadesh, leaving his other three legions to catch up. With the arrogance of youth, he had left the bulk of his army behind. Ramses decided to camp on a knoll, where he would have a clear view of the fortified city. The next day, he intended to take Kadesh and all its treasures. It was too good to be true. As Ramses set up camp, his sentries caught two Hittite spies and beat the truth out of them. Ramses had been lured into a trap. Mutwalis was waiting in the woods just behind Kadesh with 40,000 troops. As Ramses and his officers made emergency plans, the Hittites attacked. Their charioteers charged out, cutting the lagging division of Ray in half, almost totally destroying it. Then they went straight for Ramses' camp. Chariots were being repaired. Infantrymen tended to each other's tired feet. Supplies were being distributed. Ramses' pet lion was being fed. They were totally unprepared for what was coming. Breaking through the barrier of Egyptian shields that formed an enclosure around the camp, Hittite chariots surprised the tired troops. With the Egyptian army in a state of confusion, Ramses took control. He cried out, "Stand firm. Steady your hearts, my army, that you may behold my victory. I am alone, but Amun will be my protector. His hand is with me." As Ramses rallied those around him, he jumped into his chariot, said a prayer to Amun, and charged. It never occurred to him that he could lose. Surprising the Hittites with his bravery, Ramses saved the day. Marshaling his troops, he charged the Hittites 6 times. Finally, the Hittite chariots were forced to flee across the river. Mutwalis, waiting with his hordes of infantry to move in for the kill, was amazed to see his crack chariot company retreating across the river. One prince from Aleppo swallowed so much water trying to escape that he had to be held up by his ankles to be emptied. A defeat had turned into a victory. Now the right hands of the dead Hittites were cut off and piled up so Ramses' scribes could easily count the dead. It was only the end of round 1. The next morning, it was Ramses' turn to attack. After several charges, it was clear. The Hittite troops were too well trained and too numerous to be defeated. It was a standoff, but the brave Ramses had achieved a great personal victory. Mutwalis offered Ramses a peace treaty. Both parties would accept the status quo and agree never to attack each other. But Ramses would have none of it. He merely agreed to a truce. He still had designs on Kadesh. So Ramses and his army marched home to his city in the Delta. It must have been a grand entrance, with Hittite prisoners displayed and tales of the pharaoh's incredible bravery. It's the stuff of which legends are made. Ramses carved the story of the Battle of Kadesh on the walls of all his temples, creating the most detailed account of any battle in ancient history. It was a story that Ramses never tired of telling, and the Egyptians loved to hear it. But soon, he would have a totally different kind of battle on his hands. A battle with the God of the Israelites. One of the great archaeological mysteries of our time is the biblical story of Exodus, one of the most crucial parts of the Old Testament. Supposedly, 600,000 Israelites left Egypt, but there is hardly any direct archaeological evidence to support it. And one of the central characters in the story may be Ramses the Great. But did it happen? According to the Bible, the Israelites living in the Delta had grown too numerous, and in an attempt to control them, the Pharaoh was forcing the Israelites to build the store cities of Pithom and Ramses, where the army supplies were stored. When the Israelites asked for 3 days off to celebrate a religious festival, the Pharaoh not only refused, but said they would no longer be given straw to make their bricks. Brickmaking in Egypt is still the same as it was in biblical times. Straw is crucial. It gives the bricks strength and keeps them from shrinking when dried. The Pharaoh was making the Israelites meet their daily quota for bricks, but now they also had to gather and chop the straw themselves. Egyptian cities were built out of mud bricks, millions of them. Brickmaking was hard work. An Egyptian papyrus describes the brickmaker. He is dirtier than vines and pigs from treading under his mud. His clothes are stiff with clay. His sides ache, since he must be outside in a treacherous wind. He is simply wretchedness, through and through. Just the kind of task he would give to oppress the Israelites. When Moses, the leader of the Israelites, and his brother Aaron ask the Pharaoh to let their people go, he refuses. To show the power of the Lord, Aaron throws his staff to the ground, and it turns into a snake. The Pharaoh is unimpressed, and his magicians manage exactly the same thing. Apparently, it's the old snake trick that all of them knew. Today's Egyptian snake charmers still know how to do it. They're good showmen, with plenty of razzle-dazzle. But in the end, the trick is still pretty impressive. The snake charmer winds the snake around a staff, and the snake becomes immobile, and the head appears to be the top of the staff. Moses must have shown the Pharaoh something just like this. When the snake is returned to the ground, it reanimates and rears up. Watching the casual way the snake charmer handles the cobra, it's easy to forget that this is one of Egypt's most lethal killers. Modern Egyptian snake charmers perform a trick that must be a holdover from pharaonic times. They take a cobra, the symbol of the king's power, and tie it in a knot and place it on their heads so the cobra's head points outward, just like on the pharaoh's crown. The final confrontation in the Exodus story is between Egypt's living God, the Pharaoh, and the God of the Israelites, who cast 10 plagues upon Egypt. Moses says,
I will strike the water that is the Nile with the rod that is my hand, and it shall be turned to blood, and the fish on the Nile shall die, and the Nile shall become foul, and the Egyptians will loathe to drink the water from the Nile.
Even when it happened, the Pharaoh was not frightened and refused to let the Israelites go. Remember, the Pharaoh's a god too. Besides, the Nile always turned red during the season of inundation, when the river swelled and brought rich red topsoil. The next plagues, frogs, lice, insects, locusts, boils, and hail, didn't frighten the Pharaoh either. They were too much like natural occurrences, so he still refused to let the Israelites go. Then the Lord said to Moses,
Stretch out your hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt.